Moldova, a landlocked nation nestled between Romania and Ukraine, possesses one of Europe's most complex and contested histories. This small country of 33,846 square kilometers has served as a crossroads between empires, cultures, and civilizations for over 2 millennia. From ancient Dacian settlements to its current struggle between European integration and Russian influence, Moldova's story reflects the broader tensions that have shaped Eastern Europe. This comprehensive examination traces Moldova's turbulent journey through conquest, colonization, independence, and the ongoing quest for national identity. The territory of modern Moldova was first inhabited by Thracian tribes, most notably the Dacians, who established settlements along the Dniester and Prut rivers. These peoples developed sophisticated societies with advanced metallurgy, agriculture, and trade networks extending across the Black Sea region. The Roman conquest of Dacia under Emperor Trajan, 101 to 106 CE, transformed the region's demographics and culture. While the core of Dacia experienced intensive Roman colonization, the eastern territories that would become Moldova remained on the empire's periphery. Roman influence nonetheless penetrated through trade routes and gradual cultural assimilation. The Roman withdrawal from Dacia in 271 CE left a complex legacy. Latin-speaking populations, the ancestors of modern Romanians and Moldovans, continued to inhabit the region despite successive migrations. This Romanized population formed the ethnic foundation for later Moldovan identity, creating linguistic and cultural continuities that persist today. Following Roman withdrawal, Moldova became a corridor for numerous migrating peoples. Goths, Huns, Avars, Bulgars, and Magyars successively traversed or briefly controlled portions of the territory. Each wave of migration left demographic and cultural traces, contributing to the region's ethnic complexity. The most significant early medieval development was the establishment of Slavic influence through Bulgarian and later Kievan Rus expansion. The First Bulgarian Empire extended its control over southern Moldova in the 9th century, introducing Orthodox Christianity and Slavic administrative practices. Subsequently, the Principality of Galicia-Volhynia and other Rus principalities exercised varying degrees of control over northern Moldova. These successive influences created a unique cultural synthesis. The Romanized population absorbed Slavic vocabulary, Orthodox religious practices, and administrative concepts while maintaining their Latin-derived language and pastoral traditions. This cultural fusion would later distinguish Moldovan identity from both purely Romance and Slavic peoples. The emergence of an independent Moldovan state began in 1359 when Bogdan I, a Wallachian voivode, crossed the Carpathians and established the Principality of Moldavia. This marked the beginning of nearly 2 centuries of autonomous development that would define Moldovan national consciousness. Under Bogdan's successors, particularly Alexandru Cel-Bun, Alexander the Good, 1400 to 1432, Moldavia expanded significantly, controlling territories from the Carpathians to the Black Sea and from the Dniester to the Danube. The principality developed sophisticated political institutions, establishing the capital at Suceava and creating a feudal system that balanced princely authority with boyar privileges. The reign of Stephen the Great, 1457 to 1504, represents the pinnacle of medieval Moldovan achievement. Stephen successfully defended Moldavia against Ottoman Polish and Hungarian expansion through brilliant military strategy and diplomatic maneuvering. He won 46 battles while losing only 2, earning recognition throughout Europe as the Athlete of Christ for his resistance to Ottoman expansion. Stephen's legacy extended beyond military success. He founded numerous monasteries and churches, established legal codes, and promoted trade and cultural development. The painted monasteries of northern Moldova, including Voronek and Moldovica, represent UNESCO World Heritage Sites that showcase the sophisticated artistic achievements of Stephen's era. However, Moldavia's strategic position ultimately proved unsustainable. The Ottoman Empire's inexorable expansion, combined with pressure from Poland, Lithuania, and Hungary, gradually reduced Moldovan autonomy. In 1538, Moldavia became an Ottoman vassal, beginning 3 centuries of indirect Ottoman rule. Ottoman suzerainty fundamentally altered Moldova's political and social development. While maintaining formal autonomy under native princes, the Principality became increasingly integrated into the Ottoman economic and political system. The Ottomans extracted heavy tribute, controlled foreign policy, and gradually eroded traditional Moldovan institutions. The Phanariote period, 1711 to 1821, marked a particularly challenging phase. The Ottomans appointed Greek princes from Constantinople's Phanar district to rule Moldavia and Wallachia, replacing native dynasties with foreign administrators. These Phanariote princes, while often cultured and educated, primarily served Ottoman interests rather than local needs. Phanariote rule brought both modernization and exploitation. The new princes introduced Western European ideas, promoted education, and developed trade connections. However, they also imposed heavy taxation, sold administrative positions, and treated the principalities as sources of personal enrichment. This period saw significant social stratification and the gradual erosion of traditional Moldovan autonomy. Despite these challenges, Orthodox Christianity remained central to Moldovan identity. The Church preserved Moldovan language, traditions, and cultural continuity throughout the Ottoman period. Monastic centers continued to serve as repositories of learning and artistic achievement, maintaining connections to broader Orthodox civilization. The Treaty of Bucharest, 1812, between Russia and the Ottoman Empire fundamentally altered Moldova's destiny by ceding the eastern half of the Principality to Russia. This territory, called Bessarabia by the Russians, encompassed most of present-day Moldova and began a century of Russian imperial rule. Russian policy in Bessarabia aimed at complete integration into the empire. The autonomous status enjoyed under Ottoman rule was immediately abolished, and Russian administrative, legal, and educational systems were imposed. The Orthodox Church, while maintaining religious authority, became subordinated to Russian ecclesiastical hierarchy. The most significant Russian policy was systematic colonization and cultural Russification. Russian and Ukrainian settlers were encouraged to migrate to Bessarabia, while German colonists established prosperous farming communities. By the late 19th century, ethnic Moldovans comprised barely half of Bessarabia's population, creating demographic complexity that persists today. Economic development under Russian rule was substantial but exploitative. The rich Bessarabian soil proved ideal for grain production, making the province one of the empire's most important agricultural regions. However, profits primarily benefited Russian landowners and merchants rather than the local population. The emancipation of serfs in 1861 improved conditions somewhat, but Moldovan peasants remained largely impoverished. Cultural suppression accompanied economic exploitation. The Russian government banned Romanian language education, closed Romanian schools, and promoted Russian language and culture. The Moldovan literary language was artificially distinguished from Romanian through the imposition of Cyrillic script and the introduction of Russian vocabulary. Despite these pressures, Moldovan national consciousness gradually emerged during the late 19th century. Intellectuals like Alacu Russo and Constantin Stamati promoted Moldovan cultural identity and connections to broader Romanian civilization. The Revolution of 1905 sparked nationalist movements that would later contribute to Moldovan independence aspirations. World War I devastated Bessarabia through military campaigns, economic collapse, and social upheaval. The Russian Revolution of 1917 created a power vacuum that allowed Moldovan nationalists to assert independence. In November 1917, the Sfatul-Cării Country Council was established as Bessarabia's provisional government. Initially, the Sfatul-Cării declared Bessarabian autonomy within a democratic Russian federation. However, the Bolshevik victory and subsequent chaos forced Moldovan leaders to seek protection from Romania. In March 1918, citing the need to restore order and prevent Bolshevik occupation, the Sfatul-Cării voted for union with Romania. The union with Romania, 1918 to 1940, brought significant benefits and challenges. Romanian rule ended Russian cultural suppression, restored Romanian language education, and integrated Bessarabia into Western-oriented political and economic systems. Land reform redistributed large estates to peasants, improving living standards for many rural Moldovans. However, Romanian administration also generated resentment. Many Romanians viewed Bessarabians as culturally backward and in need of civilizing missions. Discrimination against minorities, particularly Russians, Ukrainians, and Jews, created ethnic tensions. Economic policies favored Romanian businesses over local enterprises, limiting Bessarabian development. The interwar period nonetheless witnessed significant progress in education, infrastructure, and cultural development. Universities were established, literacy rates increased, and Moldovan participation in Romanian political life expanded. Many Moldovans embraced Romanian identity, viewing themselves as part of a broader Romanian nation artificially divided by imperial conquest. The Nazi-Soviet Pact of 1939 sealed Bessarabia's fate by assigning it to the Soviet sphere of influence. In June 1940, the USSR issued an ultimatum demanding Romania's withdrawal from Bessarabia and northern Bukovina. Facing German pressure to avoid conflict, Romania reluctantly complied. Soviet integration of Bessarabia involved massive social and political transformation. The territory was divided between the newly created Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic and Ukraine, with northern and southern regions transferred to Ukrainian control. This partition separated ethnically Moldovan territories and created artificial boundaries that complicate contemporary politics. Stalinist policies in Moldova were particularly brutal. Mass deportations targeted unreliable elements, including former Romanian officials, wealthy peasants, and intellectuals. Collectivization destroyed traditional agricultural systems, leading to famine and social disruption. An estimated 200,000 Moldovans were deported or executed during the 1940s and 1950s. Soviet cultural policy aimed to create a distinct Moldovan identity separate from Romanian. The Cyrillic alphabet was reintroduced, Russian vocabulary was promoted, and historical connections to Romania were denied. Soviet propaganda portrayed Moldova as historically distinct from Romania, claiming that Moldovan represented a separate language rather than a Romanian dialect. Despite repression, Soviet rule brought modernization and development. Industrialization created new cities and employment opportunities. Education expanded dramatically, producing high literacy rates and technical expertise. Healthcare improvements increased life expectancy and reduced infant mortality. The post-Stalin era saw gradual liberalization and economic growth. Moldova became an important supplier of agricultural products, wine, and light manufactures to the broader Soviet market. Cultural restrictions eased somewhat, allowing limited expressions of Moldovan identity within approved Soviet frameworks. Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms unleashed powerful nationalist forces throughout the Soviet Union, and Moldova proved no exception. The Moldovan Popular Front, established in 1989, demanded political and cultural reforms including language rights, historical truth, and eventual independence. The language question became central to Moldovan politics. In August 1989, massive demonstrations forced the Moldovan government to adopt Romanian as the official language and restore the Latin alphabet. These linguistic reforms symbolized broader rejection of Soviet rule and assertion of Moldovan national identity. However, minority populations, particularly Russians and Ukrainians concentrated in Transnistria, viewed these changes as threatening their cultural and political rights. Transnistrian leaders declared independence from Moldova in 1990, beginning a separatist conflict that continues today. The August 1991 coup attempt in Moscow accelerated Moldova's independence trajectory. On August 27, 1991, the Moldovan parliament declared independence, and Mircea Snegur became the first president of independent Moldova. The Soviet collapse formalized Moldova's sovereignty, but also created enormous challenges. Independence brought hope but also severe difficulties. The Transnistrian conflict escalated into warfare in 1992, resulting in hundreds of casualties and the de facto partition of Moldova. Russian military intervention preserved Transnistrian independence, creating a frozen conflict that undermines Moldovan sovereignty and European integration. Economic collapse accompanied political turmoil. The dissolution of Soviet markets, industrial decline, and weak governance created poverty and emigration. Moldova became Europe's poorest country, with over one-third of the population working abroad by the 2000s. Remittances from migrant workers became crucial for economic survival. Political development proved equally challenging. Moldova alternated between pro-European and pro-Russian orientations depending on electoral outcomes. The Party of Communists, led by Vladimir Voronin, governed from 2001 to 2009, maintaining close ties with Russia while grudgingly accepting European integration as necessary for economic development. The 2009 elections sparked protests known as the Twitter Revolution when opposition parties alleged fraud. Subsequently, pro-European coalitions gained power and pursued European Union integration more aggressively. The association agreement with the EU, signed in 2014, represented a significant step toward European integration. However, the 2016 election of Igor Dodon as president reflected continued polarization between European and Russian orientations. Dodon, representing the pro-Russian Socialist Party, advocated closer ties with Russia and questioned European integration benefits. Contemporary Moldova faces multiple crises simultaneously. The COVID-19 pandemic devastated an already weak economy. The 2020 theft of $1 billion from Moldovan banks exposed systemic corruption and governance failures. Energy dependence on Russia creates vulnerability to political pressure. The 2020 presidential election of Maia Sandu, a pro-European former World Bank economist, renewed hopes for reform and European integration. Sandu's subsequent parliamentary victory in 2021 provided her party with governing control and mandate for anti-corruption reforms. Throughout its history, Moldova has struggled with questions of cultural and linguistic identity. The relationship between Moldovan and Romanian languages remains contentious, reflecting deeper political divisions about national orientation. Linguistic evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Moldovan and Romanian are identical languages, differing only in minor vocabulary variations comparable to American and British English. However, political considerations have artificially maintained distinctions to support arguments for separate national identity. The majority of Moldova's population speaks Romanian Moldovan as their native language, but Russian remains widely used, particularly in urban areas and Transnistria. This linguistic diversity reflects the complex demographic legacy of imperial and Soviet rule. Contemporary Moldova is officially multilingual, recognizing both Romanian and Russian as languages of interethnic communication. However, language policy remains politically sensitive, with pro-European parties promoting Romanian while pro-Russian forces defend Russian language rights. Moldova's history illustrates the challenges facing small nations caught between competing empires and civilizations. From ancient Dacian settlements to contemporary European integration efforts, Moldova has struggled to maintain cultural identity while adapting to changing geopolitical realities. The Moldovan experience demonstrates both the resilience and fragility of national identity. Despite centuries of foreign rule, linguistic suppression, and cultural manipulation, Moldovans have preserved their distinct identity while remaining open to external influences. Contemporary Moldova faces crucial choices about its future direction. The unresolved Transnistrian conflict, economic underdevelopment, and political polarization between European and Russian orientations create ongoing challenges. However, Moldova's rich cultural heritage, strategic location, and human resources provide foundations for future development. The ultimate success of Moldovan independence will depend on resolving these fundamental tensions while building inclusive institutions that serve all citizens, regardless of ethnicity or linguistic preference. Moldova's history suggests that synthesis and adaptation, rather than exclusion and confrontation, offer the best hope for sustainable development and national unity. As Moldova continues its journey toward European integration while managing relationships with Russia and resolving internal conflicts, its historical experience provides both cautionary lessons and sources of inspiration for building a prosperous, democratic, and unified nation.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more engaging historical content.